Picture this: you're having a nice meal with your wife and children, when it's interrupted by a loud crash. Bang! Boom! When the smoke and fire clears, your wife and 2 children are gone forever. This is just the beginning of the nightmare that Ho Van Tan endured before he and his son became one with the jungle. What would happen if you were forced into the wild to fend for yourself? Do you think you could survive without electronics, GPS, or a way to cook food that wouldn't make you ill? This is the story of Ho Van Long and his father, Ho Van Tan, who survived more than 41 years in the jungle of the Tai Tra district. You might be thinking, who would choose this kind of life over something more civilized? If you were faced with the tough decision Ho Van Tan had to make to protect his son, you may live in the forest for over 40 years as well. During 1972, in a small Vietnamese village, Ho Van Tan, his wife, and 3 children lived happily. Unfortunately, that changed one day when a bomb from the United States fell on their village, and his wife and 2 of their 3 children did not survive. Instead of sticking around, Ho Van Tan decided to take his surviving infant son and flee from the Vietnam War. Little did Tan know they wouldn't come into contact with another human being for over 40 years. It wasn't until 2013 when locals had discovered the pair, who had appeared to have been well adapted to their jungle-like surroundings. When a reporter approached the 2 to discuss survival techniques, they were quite enthused to bring them to the area of the forest where Ho Van Long grew up. In fact, they were thrilled to go back. The 2 had no clue that the war was over until they were found. Long grew up utterly oblivious to humans and had no idea about anything regarding the human race. His father never taught him, and his current social skills unfortunately suffer. However, he was more than thrilled to show off his survival skills to the Do Castaway team. After meeting the documentary crew and reporter, Tan and Lang then spent 5 days with the crew in the jungle, showing them their survival techniques like building a campfire, hunting, catching, cooking animals for food, and more. The father and son duo learned to craft baskets, make a shelter, and anything else they could dream up with only supplies they had: tree bark and leaves, using waterfalls as showers and streams for hydration. Tan's son Lang was unfortunately never taught about the world outside of the jungle. It was like he was in another world. When they were discovered, the son Lang spoke very little of the native language, never knew women existed, and only knew that his father had seen airplanes in the sky. He didn't know anything about time, only that the sun rose and the sun set every day. And he didn't understand that there are more sources of energy than the sun and a campfire. There's something that civilized people have in common with the pair though, moving throughout their lifetime. Because of his lack of exposure to the outside world, the Do Castaway team found that Lang was one of the most endearing people that they'd ever met. He wasn't standoffish, and his childlike mindset had him enthusiastic when the team came along to learn. He was much like a toddler when they learned to jump off a curb, unable to wait to show their parents. Throughout the 4 decades in the jungle, the 2 had moved 5 different times within the jungle. Of course, this was all done within the same range of mountains. However, they built new houses at every single place they lived. The houses were lifted high above the ground so they could sleep safely above any dangers. And their diet had a lot more variety than the average commoner may think. They ate the standard vegetables and fruit, as well as a wide variety of meats, much more than the average household consumes, from rats to snakes, birds, bats, monkeys, and fish. These were just a few of the types of meat they had consumed. They drank fresh water from local rivers and streams, and learned that no part of an animal's body should go to waste. After some time, they learned how to craft reliable tools and cutlery for the jungle kitchen, and even their clothes were made from bark. Unfortunately, Tan had to do most of this for the first few years, as Lang was only a baby when they fled from their village during the war. Because of Lang's age at the time, life forced them to never know of the simple things we often encounter every day. While this is a lot more than the average person learns to do in their lifetime, Lang never made it out of a childlike mindset because he wasn't exposed to different people or situations. He then had to take on the tough challenge of looking after his deteriorating father. Within the last few years, Tan's mental health started to go by the wayside, as well as his physical health. After all, he's close to being 90, and we can't imagine 4 decades of the jungle being easy on someone's body. Lang would lie awake at night, ridden with anxiety, hoping his father would make it through another day of dark. Because of his experience with nighttime anxiety, he cherished any moment where he had light during these darkened nights. He claimed that being able to have lights on at night was extraordinary something that most of us take for granted. When Lang was young, Tan spoke of televisions, so when Lang finally watched people on them, he knew they weren't inside of the box. However, he was in awe. Upon coming out of the jungle, Lang began to learn more of what surrounds his wildlife home. However, they didn't stray too far. He still lives in a house quite near where he grew up. And while his village is more modern, he still doesn't understand or have a grasp on social constructs and typical regulations on how to interact with someone. While endearing, Lang's childlike mindset never grew out of the make a funny face and laugh sense of humor, and he enjoys hide-and-seek-like games. While he's an adult that wears normal clothes and gets a haircut regularly, his father's not quite the same. Tan's primary goal is to get back to where his roots were planted, in the jungle. He hasn't quite adapted to his new life outside of the forest within the past few years, despite coming from a civilized village in Vietnam before his family was killed. At the end of the day, Lang's childhood and adult life have taught him about the simple things in life and how to enjoy them, while giving us a perspective on the human mind. Maybe the child inside of us doesn't leave a certain age. It's simply forced out of us due to routine and having to grow up at a certain time. For some, it may have never left at all. Where are they now? It has been 6 years since the father-son duo has been coaxed out of the jungle, and the Do Castaway team wants to give the world an update. One of the members of the DC team that interacted with Long the most through a translator, Alvaro Cerezo, returned to meet Long again and took him to a deserted island that he learned about from work. There, Cerezo took Long on a plane for the very first time, and Long often touted a very serious facial expression. He was amazed at what he saw below. Dense, lush forests surrounded by tropical waters that he fell in love with. When he stepped off the plane, he flourished into his natural self, exploring amongst the trees, and he returned to his childlike self. Since there were no coconuts in his jungle, the deserted island allowed him to open one for the very first time. He then stayed 2 days on this island and was extremely happy being in this new area. During his 2 days, he didn't relish in the environment. He remained productive and built shelter, created a campfire, and climbed trees for coconuts. Since he had never seen the sea and only fresh waters, he tried drinking the ocean water and immediately spat it back out. He had no idea seawater was salty. But something he also didn't know, the concept of an island. During the nights they were on the island, he couldn't sleep because he thought the island was like a boat, a floating piece that could sink at any time. After their journey to the deserted island, Cerezo took him back to the big city. This is where Ho Van Long saw a skyscraper for the first time. Much like the plane ride, he couldn't take his eyes off the hotel windows. He stated that he didn't like what he saw, and he much preferred to be back in the jungle. During the nights he stayed in the city, he couldn't sleep, and he kept speaking to a minimum. You might be wondering what happened to his father. Luckily, everyone will have a chance to learn about Ho Van Long later this year, as Do Castaway is releasing another documentary about his life experience. The documentary will follow Long, also known as the human Tarzan, and how he adapted to civilization, as well as his return to the jungle. To this day, you can find videos of Ho Van Long catching fish for people on YouTube, as well as making food. Since the local discovery of the two men, people have become fascinated with the idea of Long's survival techniques. He is often seen smiling and enjoying educating people in a camera on how to complete certain tasks in the jungle. There are many skills that Long has learned while living in the jungle that many of us had never had the chance to learn. And there are many things we know that Long doesn't have a clue of. Because of Do Castaway's documentaries, we're able to get a closer look at how a full-grown man interacts with the outside world that he's never known. After learning of Ho Van Tan and Ho Van Long, do you think you could survive just as well in the jungle? Would you like to commit to a week with Long in hopes of learning some survival skills? Most importantly, could you turn off your phone for a week without losing your mind? I imagine that the world as a whole could learn a thing or two from Long if we had the chance to communicate with him. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe so you'll be the first to know when we post a new video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.